3 months after the surgery took most of her right hand, Audra Fleming's 2 sons and her daughter made their decisions in the span of 11 days. Each one separately, each one with a reason that sounded reasonable over the phone. The woman who ran the alteration shop on the next block was 54 years old. She had been sewing since she was 9. Her name was Meredith Osei-Briggs, and the girl who started coming by on Tuesdays to drop off her grandmother's dry cleaning did not know yet that Meredith had been watching the shop go dark, piece by piece, for the better part of a year. The girl was 22. She did not know what Meredith would give her. Meredith did not know yet what the girl had been carrying alone since September. Meredith Eleanor Osei-Briggs had run the alteration shop on Clair Avenue West in Toronto for 21 years. The shop was called Needle and Time, which her late husband Leonard had named it, and which she had kept because she could not think of anything more honest. It was a narrow space between a Portuguese bakery and a phone repair place, with a front window she dressed every season, and a back room that smelled like steam and chalk and the particular warmth of a pressing iron left on too long. She had 2 sewing machines and a serger and a hand-stitching station under a lamp she'd bought at a garage sale in 1998. The lamp was not good. She had bought a better one twice and kept returning to the garage sale one. Some things you know by feel. She had come to Canada from Accra in 1991 with her husband and $40 above what the flight had cost them, and a sewing kit her mother had packed inside her left shoe. Leonard found work first, at a print shop on Bloor. Meredith found work 3rd, 4th, and 5th, in the way immigrants find work, meaning she found several things at once and held them all until one became enough. She cleaned offices. She altered curtains out of someone's basement. She sewed bridesmaid dresses on commission for a woman who advertised in the church bulletin and paid late and argued about the invoice every single time, and whose niece Meredith still sees on the bus occasionally and does not hold responsible. By 1997, she had enough saved to sign a lease. Leonard co-signed and said he believed in her and meant it, which was the only kind of believing worth anything. The shop opened on a Tuesday in March with no party and no sign yet because the sign was being painted, and it arrived Thursday, and by then she had already taken in 6 items, and one of them was a wedding dress, and she had not slept in 31 hours. She slept well that Thursday. She slept the way a person sleeps when they have built the thing they meant to build. She took in hems, zippers, linings, buttons. She took in the things people were not supposed to bring to alteration shops and brought anyway. The leather jacket from a dead father, the communion dress that was now too small for the daughter, but not yet ready to be passed on, the hockey jersey with the wrong number that had to become the right number without anyone being able to tell. She did not turn things away. She quoted honestly and took a little longer than she said she would, and charged less than she had quoted, and built a reputation the way reputations are actually built, which is one satisfied person at a time over a period of years long enough that you stop counting. Leonard died in 2009, heart attack, sudden, at 61, in the parking lot of the hardware store on Weston Road. He had gone to buy caulking. He did not come back with the caulking. Meredith was at the shop when the call came. She sat down on the floor beside the hand-stitching station with the phone in her lap and did not move for 40 minutes. A customer came in. The customer saw her and left and came back 20 minutes later with a coffee she hadn't asked for and sat with her on the floor without saying anything, and that customer, a retired letter carrier named Phyllis, came back every Tuesday for the next 3 years just to check in, and Meredith still sends her a Christmas card. She kept the shop. That is the short version. The longer version is that she thought about closing it every morning for 4 months and decided each time not to by lunchtime. The shop was the thing Leonard had believed in. She was not going to close the thing Leonard had believed in. She kept it open. She kept going. She learned to take in more at a slower pace and charge more accurately. And she hired a part-time helper on Thursdays named Bev, who had been retired from Air Canada for 6 years and who did not know how to sew, but who could answer the phone. and run the press and keep things organized in the way that only people who spent careers managing logistics can. Her children left in their own order, at their own speeds, for their own good reasons. None of them left badly. That is the part that made it harder later. Marcus was the eldest. He left first. He had a degree in civil engineering from Ryerson and a job offer in Calgary when he was 26, and he took it because of course he took it. Because Calgary in 2007 was a place you went if you had a civil engineering degree and ambition, and he had both. He called every second Sunday. He came home for Christmas most years and always meant to come in the summer and rarely did. He was not a bad son. He was a son who lived in Calgary, which is the same as being a good son from a certain distance and a different thing from a closer one. His wife Janelle was kind and organized and had strong opinions about scheduling and did not find it strange that they had not visited Meredith in 3 years because the flights were expensive and the kids had school. And there was always something. And Meredith had always said she was fine. Meredith had always said she was fine. Nicole was the middle one. She left Toronto at 30 for Vancouver and a marketing position she'd worked toward for 7 years and deserved completely. She called more than Marcus. She sent flowers on Meredith's birthday, the right flowers, always, because Nicole paid attention to that kind of thing. She had a partner named Dev and a condo on the east side and a calendar that was always full and a mother she loved from 4,400 kilometers away, which is a kind of love that is real and also a kind of love that costs the person being loved, something Nicole could not see because she was not there to see it. Nicole had offered to hire someone, a home support worker, a cleaner, a meal service. She had researched options and sent Meredith a document with links. Meredith had thanked her and not read the document. Not because she was proud, because she was 62 and still working, and the document had been for a person who needed those things, and Meredith had not believed yet that she was that person. Then, the table saw changed that. She had been helping her neighbor Hugh dismantle an old deck. This was the kind of thing Meredith did because Meredith had spent 30 years building goodwill on her block by showing up when someone needed an extra set of hands. Hugh was 77 and had no business operating a table saw, and Meredith had been steadying the board from the other end when Hugh's grip slipped. The saw did not take her whole hand. That is what the surgeon said at St. Michael's, twice, as though she should feel grateful, and she understood why he said it, and she was grateful, and also it did not feel like the kind of thing you led with. The right index and middle fingers were gone. The thumb was intact. The ring and small finger were intact. The tendon damage to the remaining fingers was significant. Recovery would be long. The nerve damage was not fully mapped yet. For a woman who had sewn for 45 years, the surgeon said carefully, there would be limitations. Limitations. That was the word he chose. Meredith looked at the ceiling and thought about the wedding dress she had taken in last month. The seed pearls she had reattached by hand, 214 of them. The customer had counted them after. She thought about the invisible hem on the funeral suit that had belonged to the customer's father, and that the customer could not stop touching at the funeral because it felt so smooth. She thought about her mother's sewing kit, still in the box on the shelf in the back room. She called her children that evening from the hospital room. She called Marcus first. Marcus picked up on the third ring. She could hear one of his kids in the background. She told him what had happened. There was a pause, not long, maybe 4 seconds, and she could tell in those 4 seconds that he was doing the math, the way you do the math when something you've been not thinking about arrives as an actual problem. He said, Mom, that's okay. Okay, listen, the timing is really hard right now. The Crowchild project just went into this phase where I can't. I'm going to call you tomorrow and we're going to figure this out. I promise. She said, Okay, Marcus. He did not call the next day. He called 2 days later, and the conversation was 10 minutes and ended with him saying he was looking into things. She called Nicole second. Nicole answered immediately and said, Mom, the way you say a person's name when you already know something is wrong. Meredith told her. Nicole's response was faster and more thorough, and in some ways harder to hear, because it was so organized. She said she would start calling home care agencies in the morning. She said she would cover the costs. Whatever they were. She said, I can't leave right now. The campaign launches in 3 weeks, and I'm the only one who knows the whole thing end to end. But the second it's done, Mom, I'm coming." Meredith said, "I know, baby." Nicole said, "I love you." Meredith said it back. It was the truest thing said in the conversation, and also not the thing Meredith needed. She called her youngest last. Danny, 29 years old. The one she had been most careful not to burden, because Danny had only just finished her master's degree in Guelph and was working 2 part-time jobs and had student debt that Meredith knew the number of and did not talk about. She had almost not called. She called because Danny was her daughter, and she had promised herself years ago that she would not sort her children by usefulness. Danny picked up on the first ring. She said, "Mom, I know, Nicole already texted me." There was a silence. A real one. The kind where a person is deciding something on the other end of the line. Then Danny said, "I have a shift tomorrow morning, but I can be there by 2. I'll stay through the weekend." She did not ask if Meredith needed her. She just said she was coming. Meredith said, "You don't have to do that." Danny said, "I know." And she came. She stayed through the weekend. Then she stayed through the next week. She slept on the couch in the back room of the shop and helped Meredith open in the mornings. And she learned how to use the press. And she answered the phone. And she made tea at 4 o'clock every afternoon, the way Meredith had made tea at 4 o'clock every afternoon for 21 years, without being asked, because she had watched her mother do it enough times to know it was not optional. She was not a seamstress. She could not take in a hem, but she could manage the front of the shop and carry the pressing and talk to customers in the particular way. Meredith talked to customers, which was warm and direct and never made anyone feel like their repair was an inconvenience. Meredith watched her daughter do all of this and said nothing about it. She did not tell Danny that she was the only one who had come. She did not say what she had not said to Marcus or Nicole. She made tea and let her daughter sit with her at the end of the day. And she told her about Leonard, which she had not done in years, because Danny had been 16 when Leonard died, and there is a lot you do not say to a 16-year-old because you are trying to protect them. And then suddenly they are 29, and sitting across from you at the 4 o'clock tea, and the protection has expired. Danny listened. She did not check her phone. She asked questions about Leonard. The way a person asks questions, when they genuinely want to know. And she learned things about her father that she did not know. She did not know, and Meredith learned that her youngest daughter had spent 13 years carrying a version of her father that was incomplete and that she had been waiting a long time for someone to fill in the rest. There were problems. There were months where the problems compounded. Meredith could not do the fine work anymore. She could take in a hem with enough accommodation, but the detail work, the work she had built her reputation on, the invisible repairs and the beadwork, and the hand-stitching that no machine could replicate, that was gone. She knew it after the 3rd week. She did not say it out loud for another 3 months. She started turning away the fine work. She would say she was booked out. She would refer people to another shop on Bloor. Bev, who still came Thursdays, noticed and said nothing, because Bev had spent 30 years in aviation and understood that some equipment changes require a new flight plan and that a pilot does not need to be reminded that the old one is obsolete. Danny had gone back to Guelph by then. She came every second weekend. She drove the hour and a half each way, and she did not make it a thing, and she did not post about it. She just appeared on Saturday morning with coffee and stayed until Sunday afternoon. When one of her part-time jobs ended, she picked up a remote research position and moved her schedule around so the Saturdays were always free. Marcus called more after the first month. His calls were awkward in the way calls are when a person knows they have not done enough and is compensating with information. Updates about the kids. Updates about the project. Updates about a vacation they were planning. Meredith listened. She asked about the grandchildren by name. She did not make it hard. She had not been raised to make things hard, and she did not intend to start. Nicole sent money, which helped and was not help. She called every few days and asked the same questions in slightly different order. She sent a meal kit subscription that Meredith used twice and then canceled because the portions were sized for people with 2 working hands and time. She did not say this to Nicole. There was a woman named Beatriz Fonseca who came in on the last Tuesday of every month with her grandmother's dry cleaning from the place 2 doors down. She had been doing it for a year and a half, ever since her grandmother Louisa had stopped being able to manage the stairs. Beatriz was 22, a second-year nursing student at U of T, and she moved through the world the way Elijah had moved through it in a different city, in a different story, which is to say quietly and without requiring acknowledgement. She held the door for the person behind her without looking to see who it was. She tipped at counter service. She had the specific attentiveness of someone who had learned young to watch the room, because the room sometimes needed watching. She came in on a Tuesday in November, and the shop was dark in the front, and she knocked. And Meredith came from the back and unlocked the door, and Beatriz could see in the time it took Meredith to cross the room and turn the deadbolt that something was different. She did not say anything about it. She handed over the dry cleaning ticket and said her grandmother sent her thanks, and then she said, "Do you need someone to sit with you for a bit? I've got an hour before my shift." Meredith looked at her. She said, "I'm fine." Beatriz said, "Okay." She did not leave. She looked at the pressing station and at the iron sitting cold and at the unfinished work on the table, and she said, "I can press if you show me how." Meredith showed her how. That was a Tuesday in November. By December, Beatriz was coming twice a week, not because Meredith had asked, because Beatriz had a schedule that had 2 gaps in it, and she had decided, without ceremony, to spend those gaps at the shop. She could not sew. She learned to press and to manage the front and to take in the simpler items under Meredith's direction, and she was careful and slow and made the same mistakes twice, but not 3 times, and she asked questions the way a nursing student asks questions, meaning she wanted the actual answer and not the polite one. She talked about her patients the way Meredith had once talked to Leonard about her customers. Not with names, with details that were really about the person doing the caring as much as the person being cared for. She talked about a man on the ward who had no one visiting and who she had been checking on during her breaks because he seemed like the kind of person who had been reliable for other people for a long time and had no practice receiving. Meredith listened and said, "I know that kind." They started having tea at 4. Meredith used the good cups, which she had not done since Leonard. The shop was struggling. She knew the numbers. She had always known the numbers. The fine work had been 30% of her revenue, and she could not do it anymore. And she had not told anyone what that meant in concrete terms, because she did not know how to say it without sounding like she was asking for something. She was not built for asking. She had spent 30 years building a life that did not require asking, and now she was 54, with a hand that would never close the right way, and a lease that renewed in April, and a bank balance that said very clearly that April was a question. She had a safe, not under the bed, in the filing cabinet in the back room, the second drawer, behind the tax folders. It was not dramatic. It was a fireproof document box with a combination she had not changed since 2003. Inside was Leonard's insurance payout, which she had not touched. She had never touched it. She had built the shop on her own earnings and told herself the insurance was for something that mattered, and she had never found a thing that mattered enough. She had found a lot of things that almost mattered. None of them had cleared the bar. The box also had a letter. She had written it in 2019, on a Saturday night in February, when the shop had a slow week, and she was sitting in the back room after closing, and she was thinking about Leonard and about what it would mean to have done good work for 20 years and not have passed it on to anyone. The letter was addressed to no one. She had written to whoever keeps this going at the top and then written everything she knew about the shop. The wholesale suppliers, the machine maintenance schedule, the names of the customers who paid late but always paid, The customers who paid early and should be treated accordingly. The hemming technique Leonard had called her signature, the girl in Scarborough who had been apprenticing with her off and on for 2 years and who had real hands for it and needed someone to believe that. She had put the letter back in the box. She had not opened the box since. It was a Tuesday in March. Beatrice came at her regular time and brought 2 coffees and helped with the press, and at 4 o'clock they sat down with the tea, and Meredith did not start talking right away. Beatrice waited. She had learned to wait. Meredith said, "I want to show you something in the back." They went to the back room. Meredith opened the filing cabinet. She took out the document box. She put the combination in. She opened it. Inside was the letter and underneath it a bank envelope from TD from 2009. She handed the envelope to Beatrice. Inside was a cashier's check made out to the business, for a sum that Beatrice read twice before she looked up, $38,000, made out to Needle and Time. Meredith said, "That's Leonard's money. I never used it because I never found the right use for it." She paused. "The lease is up in April. If someone wanted to take over the shop, they would need the first and last and a few months of float while they built the clientele back up. They would need a teacher who still knows everything, even if her hands don't work as well. And they would need to not be afraid of old equipment." Beatrice put the envelope down on the workbench. She said, "Mrs. Osei-Briggs, I'm in nursing school." Meredith said, "I know." She said, "I'm not asking you to give up nursing school. I'm asking you if you'd want to do 2 things at once. You've been doing 2 things at once since September. You're good at it." Beatrice looked at the letter. She pulled it out slowly and started reading. She read it all the way through. When she got to the part about the girl in Scarborough with the real hands for it, she stopped. She looked up. Meredith said, "I didn't know it was you until December, the way you held the iron the first time. Leonard used to hold the iron that way. I don't know what that means. I just know what I noticed." Beatrice set the letter down on the workbench carefully, the way you set down something that has weight you did not expect. She looked at the document box. She looked at Meredith. She said, "I need to think," Meredith said. "Of course." She put the envelope and the letter back in the box. She closed it. She put it back in the filing cabinet. She said, "The tea's still warm." They went back to the kitchen table. The tea was still warm. Beatrice wrapped both hands around her cup and did not say anything for a while, and Meredith let her not say anything, the way a person lets a person think when they have given them something real to think about. Outside, St. Clair was doing what St. Clair did in March, which was be gray and cold and unconvincing about spring. A streetcar went by. Someone was arguing with a parking meter. The Portuguese bakery next door sent warm bread smell through the shared wall, the way it did every afternoon, and Meredith had stopped noticing it years ago and had started noticing it again sometime around December without knowing why. Beatrice said, "Your daughter, the one who comes on Saturdays." Meredith waited. Beatrice said, "Does she know about the box?" Meredith said no. Beatrice nodded. She drank her tea. Then she said, "I think she should know." Meredith looked at her. Beatrice said, "Not because she has a claim on it. She doesn't. You can do whatever you want with Leonard's money. She stopped. She looked at her cup. "I've been watching you not tell people things for 4 months. I think you're good at it. I think it cost you." Meredith did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You sound like a nurse." Beatrice said, "I'm trying to." That Saturday, when Danny arrived with her coffee at 10 in the morning, Meredith sat her down at the kitchen table in the back room and told her about the document box. She told her about Leonard's money and the letter and April, and what it would take to keep the shop going. She told her about Beatrice. She told her that she had not made any decisions yet, and that she was not asking Danny to tell her what to do, only that she was tired of knowing things alone. Danny sat across from her and did not interrupt once. When Meredith was done, Danny put her coffee cup down and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad kept that money for 21 years, Meredith said. "He kept it since he died. I kept it. Same thing." Danny said, "No, it's not." She said, "Dad would have wanted it to go to the shop." He always wanted it to go to the shop, he just knew it wasn't his call to make. Meredith looked at her daughter. She thought about the thing she had not been able to say to Marcus or Nicole, the thing she had been carrying since November. She said it now. She said, "I can't do the fine work anymore. Not ever. My hands will not do what I need them to do, and they are not going to. And I have been pretending that's a temporary problem for 4 months, and it is not a temporary problem." Danny looked at her. Her face did not do anything dramatic. She said, "I know, Mom." She said it quietly. "I've known since January." Meredith said, "You didn't say anything." Danny said, "I was waiting for you to say it first." They sat there for a while. The bread's smell came through the wall. Danny refilled the tea. She did not ask if Meredith wanted it refilled. She just filled it the way she had been filling it for months. The way you do something when you have learned the shape of another person's habits, and you do it without commentary, because the commentary would ruin it. After a while, Meredith said, "I want to give the shop to Beatrice. Not as a gift, as a partnership. Leonard's money as the initial capital. She signs the lease, she runs as the front, she trains with me for as long as I can teach. When I can't anymore, she has everything I know." She paused. "I want to make sure Danny knows because Danny should not find out later." Danny said, "I don't have a claim on the shop." Meredith said, "I know. That's not why I'm telling you." Danny said, "Why are you telling me?" Meredith said, "Because you came. Because you have been coming every Saturday for 5 months, and you have never once asked what you were going to get for it, and I want you to know I see that. I don't want you to find out about Beatrice and think I didn't see it." Danny looked out the small high window in the back room. It faced the alley. There was nothing in the alley worth looking at. She looked at it anyway. She said, "Marcus and Nicole don't know about any of this." Meredith said, "No." Danny said, "You should tell them." Meredith said, "I know." She called them that evening. Marcus first, then Nicole. The conversations were different from the November calls in ways that are hard to quantify. Marcus listened this time without calculating. Nicole asked fewer questions and cried a little, which she would have denied. Both of them said they were sorry. Meredith said it was okay. She meant some of it. In April, Needle and Time renewed its lease. The name on the lease was Beatrice Fonseca. Below it, in the line for co-signatories, was Meredith Eleanor Osei-Briggs. Beatrice continued nursing school. She took the evening sections when she could and the Saturday clinicals, and she managed the shop from 7 in the morning until noon on the days she did not have placement. Meredith came in at 10 and stayed until 3 and taught her everything. Not the way a teacher teaches a student, but the way someone teaches a person they have decided to trust, which is slower and more careful, and involves saying the things that are not in any manual. She taught her the pressing. She taught her the grain lines. She taught her the difference between a customer who knows what she wants and a customer who knows how she wants to feel, and how you talk to each one differently. She taught her the late payers and the early payers, and she told her the story of the wedding dress with the 214 seed pearls, and she told her she would never do that work again. And that was all right, because now Beatrice would. The girl from Scarborough came in April, and Meredith introduced her to Beatrice. And the 3 of them sat in the back room, and Meredith described a technique she had developed in 2004 for setting a lining, without it ever showing at the hem. And both younger women leaned forward the same way at the same time. And Meredith thought about Leonard and about the thing he had believed in, and she did not say anything out loud about what she was thinking. She did not need to. The document box is still in the filing cabinet. Leonard's money is in the business account now, working the way he would have wanted it to work. The letter is still in the box. Meredith has not reread it. She does not need to. Everything in it is now standing in front of her every Tuesday and Thursday morning in a 22-year-old woman who holds a pressing iron with both hands and who asked, the first week of April, whether the good teacups were for Saturdays only or for any day. Meredith said any day. If this story made you think about someone who shows up without being asked, who fills the kettle before it runs dry, who stays an extra hour, who doesn't post about it, tell them. Not in a text. In words that require your voice. The people who quietly fill the gaps are the last ones to believe they've done enough, and they almost never hear that they have. And if it made you think of a door you left open and then quietly walked away from, that door is probably still there. It might not be open much longer, but it is probably still there. Leave your answer below. I want to read what you think Meredith should have done differently, or what you think she got right. This is not a clean question. Clean questions do not leave 175 comments. Subscribe. See you in the next one.